The Reddit post appeared at 11:47 p.m. on Singapore, typed by shaking fingers on a smartphone screen cracked from being dropped in panic 3 hours earlier. The username was Throwaway Confused 23, created minutes before posting, and the title would become infamous within hours. I'm sleeping with a married tech CEO, and his wife just found my TikTok where I accidentally exposed everything. I think I'm in danger. The post continued for 8 paragraphs. A stream of consciousness confession from 23-year-old Nicole Alvarez, a University of Singapore business student who'd been documenting her glamorous life on TikTok without realizing her 340,000 followers included the worst possible viewer. Amanda Chen, wife of the man Nicole had been sleeping with for 6 months. The post described luxury dinners at restaurants Nicole couldn't pronounce, weekends at Sentosa Cove properties, designer gifts that came wrapped in gilt and expensive paper, and the intoxicating attention of a man who made her feel like she mattered in a city where foreign students were often invisible unless they were useful. She found my TikTok, Nicole wrote, her terror evident through the screen. She knows where I live because he has my address for the deliveries. She knows my university. She sent me a message 30 minutes ago that just said, "We need to talk. Tomorrow 10 a.m. Raffles Place MRT. Come alone or I involve your scholarship office." I'm terrified. What do I do? The post received 847 comments in the first hour, advice ranging from pragmatic to paranoid, from sympathetic to savage. "Don't go alone," wrote the top comment. "This is how people disappear in Singapore. Bring a friend, tell someone where you are, record everything." Another commenter noted ominously, "Amanda Chen isn't just any wife. Her family owns half of Singapore's logistics infrastructure. If she wants to make you vanish, she has the resources." Nicole read every comment, her stomach churning, her mind racing through scenarios that ranged from uncomfortable conversation to outcomes she couldn't quite articulate but which terrified her completely. At 2:34 a.m., she posted an update. "I'm going to meet her. I'll update you all after. If I don't update by noon tomorrow, please someone contact the Philippine Embassy. My real name is Nicole Marie Alvarez. I'm from Cebu, I'm a student at NUS, and I'm scared I won't survive this." The update would be the last thing anyone would hear from Nicole Alvarez. By noon the following day, her phone would be offline. By evening, her dormitory room would be empty of her belongings. And by the end of the week, Singapore's most orderly, camera-surveilled, tightly controlled city-state would face the uncomfortable reality that a young woman had vanished completely, and the most likely suspects were people whose wealth placed them functionally above the accountability that governed ordinary citizens. This is the story of how a love affair became a death sentence, and how the internet both documented and failed to prevent a tragedy unfolding in real time. Nicole Marie Alvarez understood from age 12 that education was her only escape route. She grew up in Talisay City, just outside Cebu, in a household where money was a constant anxiety that colored every decision. Her father, Benjamin, worked as a jeepney driver supplemented by occasional construction gigs that appeared and disappeared with maddening unpredictability. Her mother, Elena, cleaned houses for wealthy Chinese Filipino families in Cebu City's gated subdivisions. Her days spent making other people's homes perfect, while her own family's modest house in Talisay deteriorated from deferred maintenance they couldn't afford. Nicole was the eldest of 4 children, each representing both blessing and burden in a family where resources stretched so thin they became transparent. Her younger brothers, twins Miguel and Rafael, were 13 and already showing signs they'd follow their father into transportation work rather than complete their education. Her baby sister, Sophia, was 8, and the family's collective hope for a daughter who might achieve what Nicole was working toward. University education, professional career, elevation beyond their circumstances. But Nicole was different from the start, not just intelligent but ferociously determined, blessed with the kind of strategic thinking that allowed her to see paths where others saw only walls. She attended public school through high school, studying by candlelight during the frequent power cuts that plagued their neighborhood, teaching herself advanced English from YouTube videos and pirated educational content. and maintaining perfect grades not because she loved learning, but because she understood that academic excellence was her only negotiable currency. Her beauty was an asset she recognized and calculated carefully. At 20, she was striking in that particular way that social media algorithms favored: camera-ready features, clear skin, expressive eyes, and the ability to project confidence even when her stomach was cramping from having skipped lunch to save money for school supplies. She created her TikTok account, at Nicole Lux Life, in 2019 as a sophomore, initially posting study tips and scholarship advice for Filipino students dreaming of international education. The breakthrough came when she documented her own application process for the Singapore Philippines Scholarship Program, a competitive merit-based scheme that offered full tuition, living stipend, and airfare to outstanding Filipino students. Her videos showing her essay writing process, interview preparation, and eventual acceptance went viral within Filipino education circles. Not millions of views, but a solid 50,000 followers who saw her as aspirational yet achievable, someone who'd climbed from circumstances they recognized. Nicole arrived in Singapore in August 2020 at 21 years old, carrying one suitcase and expectations so heavy they felt like physical weight. The National University of Singapore sprawled across Kent Ridge like a city within a city. Modern architecture, manicured landscapes, facilities so advanced compared to Philippine universities that her first weeks felt like living in a different century. She was enrolled in the business school, pursuing a degree that seemed like a passport to prosperity, studying alongside some of Asia's brightest students while representing the success story her family desperately needed her to embody. The scholarship provided $800 monthly stipend, approximately 30,000 pesos, more than her father earned in a good month, plus free campus housing and meal allowances. After sending $400 home to her family monthly, Nicole lived on $400 that had to cover textbooks, transportation, personal expenses, and the occasional social activity that kept her from complete isolation. By Singapore standards, she lived in poverty. By Talisay standards, she was wealthy. The dissonance was psychologically exhausting. She documented her Singapore life on TikTok with strategic curation. The stunning campus views, study sessions in air-conditioned libraries, weekend explorations of the city's tourist attractions. What she didn't show was the loneliness of being a scholarship student among wealthy locals and internationals, the exhaustion of maintaining perfect grades because scholarship renewal was never guaranteed, the hunger some days when she chose between adequate food and having money to send home, and the constant awareness that she was performing success for an audience that included her family who needed to believe their sacrifices were yielding returns. Her content evolved over her first year, moving from pure educational material to lifestyle content that attracted a broader audience. She posted Get Ready With Me videos showing her transformation from exhausted student to polished young woman using drugstore makeup. She shared budget hacks for living in expensive Singapore. She documented part-time jobs, tutoring, event promotion, occasional modeling for e-commerce brands that supplemented her stipend and her content simultaneously. By September 2021, she had 180,000 followers, enough to attract brand partnerships and affiliate marketing opportunities that added $500-800 monthly to her income. But the isolation remained profound. Most NUS students fell into established social groups, wealthy Singaporeans who'd known each other since elite secondary schools, international students from families that could afford $50,000 plus annual tuition, or clusters of students from the same country who formed protective cultural bubbles. Nicole existed in the margins of all these groups, friendly with many but close to none, too wealthy by her family's standards to complain, but too poor by Singapore standards to participate in the casual brunches, shopping trips, and bar nights that built the social bonds she craved. Her romantic life was minimal. She dated briefly in Cebu before leaving, a boyfriend from her high school who'd wanted her to stay rather than pursue Singapore opportunities. But that relationship had dissolved under the pressure of distance and diverging futures. In Singapore, dating felt complicated by class considerations and the emotional exhaustion of perpetually performing adequacy. The wealthy local and international men who occasionally showed interest seemed to view her as exotic novelty rather than equal partner. The Filipino men she encountered were mostly service workers. Nothing wrong with that, but she couldn't date someone whose circumstances reminded her too sharply of what she was running from. By March 2022, at 22 and entering her final year of study, Nicole was academically successful, financially stable, and emotionally depleted. She'd achieved everything she'd dreamed of: international education, financial security for her family, a growing social media presence, and still felt like she was performing a role rather than living a life. She was lonely in the specific way of people who are surrounded by others but truly known by no one. She was vulnerable in ways she didn't recognize, primed for the kind of attention that would make her feel special rather than strategic, seen rather than simply useful. That's when she met David Chen. David Chen represented Singapore's aspirational narrative, the meritocracy myth personified. The poor boy made good through intelligence, determination, and the kind of ruthless ambition that looked like virtue when directed toward success. Born in 1985 to working-class parents in Toa Payoh, David had attended neighborhood schools before testing into Raffles Institution on merit, studying computer science at NUS, and founding his first tech startup at 23 with borrowed money and dormitory room coding sessions that became industry legend. By 37, David's company, Velocity Tech, had become one of Singapore's success stories, a B2B logistics software platform serving clients across Southeast Asia, valued at $400 million after Series D funding, and employing 300 people across 5 countries. David personally was worth approximately $120 million on paper, owned a penthouse in Marina Bay, drove a Porsche Taycan, and was regularly featured in business media as an example of homegrown entrepreneurial excellence. His marriage to Amanda Lim in 2010 had been a calculated partnership as much as romantic union. Amanda came from one of Singapore's established wealthy families. Her grandfather had built a logistics empire in the 1960s. Her father had expanded it regionally, and Amanda herself held an executive position in the family business that was equal parts genuine competence and hereditary privilege. The marriage merged David's tech sector dynamism with Amanda's old money connections, creating a power couple celebrated in Singapore's business and social circles. They had 2 children, Ethan, 9, and Sophie, 6, who attended Singapore American School at annual tuition costs exceeding $40,000 per child. The family presented a perfect image: successful father, accomplished mother, beautiful children, and the kind of lifestyle that magazines featured in aspirational spreads. But like most perfect images, reality was significantly more complicated beneath the surface. David's relationship with Amanda had cooled from partnership to performance art. They shared a home, children, social obligations, and financial interests, but genuine intimacy had evaporated years ago under the pressure of his company building and her family expectations. They slept in separate bedrooms, took separate vacations justified by work obligations, and maintained their marriage because divorce would be financially catastrophic for David and socially embarrassing for Amanda. They'd achieved success together but had forgotten, if they'd ever known, how to enjoy it together. David's previous affairs had been discreet and transactional: occasional escorts when traveling, a brief fling with a colleague that ended amicably when both parties recognized the career risks. He'd never allowed himself to become emotionally invested, viewing extramarital sex as stress relief rather than relationship seeking. But by early 2022, at 37, and feeling increasingly hollow despite his success, David found himself craving something beyond just physical release. He wanted to feel desired rather than hired, to experience excitement rather than obligation, to escape briefly into a version of himself that wasn't defined entirely by corporate leadership and family responsibility. He discovered Nicole's TikTok by algorithm accident in March 2022. Her day in the life of an NUS business student, video appearing on his For You page during a lunch break. He watched, initially drawn by her beauty but increasingly captivated by her personality. The mix of ambition and vulnerability, the evident intelligence, the way she spoke about her scholarship and family obligations with pride rather than shame. She seemed real in a way that the carefully curated people in his social circles no longer did. He followed her account using a burner account he'd created, watching her content accumulate over several weeks, learning details about her life, her schedule, her interests, her favorite study spots, her financial struggles communicated through budget content. He noticed she posted frequently from NUS Business Library, from specific cafes near campus, from the Botanic Gardens where she went to decompress. And he noticed she was obviously lonely, her captions often referencing studying alone, exploring alone, the perpetual outsider status of scholarship students. The first contact came through Instagram DM in April 2022, from a professional account under his actual name rather than the burner he'd used to follow her. The message was calculated. "Hi Nicole, I'm an NUS alum and Velocity Tech CEO. I came across your content about scholarship experience and would love to discuss potential mentorship opportunities for outstanding students like yourself. Would you be open to coffee?" It was manipulative from the inception, framing romantic interest as professional opportunity, using his success as leverage, targeting a young woman whose financial precarity made declining networking opportunities essentially impossible. But manipulation came naturally to men who'd built businesses through strategic relationship cultivation, and who'd learned that power could reshape reality according to their preferences. Nicole responded within hours, professional but clearly excited about the possibility of mentorship from a successful entrepreneur. They met for coffee at a high-end cafe in Orchard on April 15, 2022. Neutral territory, public space, seemingly innocent. David was charming, attentive, asking about her studies and career ambitions while subtly displaying his wealth through casual references to deals, travel, and business decisions. He was handsome in that particularly polished way of wealthy Singaporean men, well-dressed, well-groomed, radiating the confidence that came from being accustomed to success. For Nicole, the attention felt validating in ways she hadn't experienced since arriving in Singapore. Here was a successful man treating her as interesting and valuable, seeing potential beyond her utility as cheap labor or exotic curiosity. He asked about her family, her background, her dreams beyond just the sanitized career aspirations. He seemed genuinely interested, and whether that interest was genuine or performed mattered less than how it made her feel. Seen, valued, special. The relationship progressed with calculated escalation over the following months. David framed their subsequent meetings as mentorship, lunch to discuss her career path, dinner to introduce her to business concepts, weekend meetings at his office to show her how startups operated. But the settings grew progressively more intimate and expensive. Private dining rooms, luxury hotels for conferences that never quite materialized, a weekend trip to Bintan justified as networking retreat. Gifts appeared, a laptop for her studies, designer bags, because she deserved nice things. Allowances of $500-1,000 monthly framed as internship compensation for the business advice she was supposedly providing. Nicole wasn't naive about what was happening. She recognized the trajectory, understood that successful married men didn't spend this much time and money on scholarship students purely from mentorship generosity. But she was also lonely, flattered, and increasingly financially dependent on David's generosity. The $1,000 monthly he was providing allowed her to send more money home, to participate in social activities she couldn't previously afford, to feel less like she was constantly drowning in the pressure of maintaining perfect performance on inadequate resources. The first time they had sex was in June 2022, in a hotel room at Marina Bay Sands that cost $800 a night, more than Nicole's monthly stipend. It felt simultaneously inevitable and surreal, crossing a line that transformed their relationship from ambiguous to undeniable. David was tender and attentive, making her feel desired rather than just used. Afterward, lying in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly food budget, Nicole felt a complicated mix of satisfaction, guilt, power, and vulnerability that would characterize their entire affair. The affair continued for 6 months, settling into patterns that felt almost like a legitimate relationship despite the obvious constraints. They met 2 to 3 times weekly, usually weekday afternoons when David could justify being away from office and home, occasionally weekends when he manufactured business trips. He continued providing financial support that had escalated to $1,500 monthly, framing it as payment for consulting work that gave both parties plausible deniability about their actual arrangement. Nicole continued documenting her life on TikTok, but with increasing recklessness born from the intoxication of finally having the lifestyle she'd been performing. She posted videos from expensive restaurants, showing designer bags and clothes, exploring luxury properties, and living visibly beyond what a scholarship student could afford. She never showed David directly, maintaining enough strategic awareness to keep him out of frame, but she documented everything around him: the views, the food, the gifts, the life that came from sleeping with a married man who could afford to make her feel special. Her follower count grew to 340,000 by October 2022, driven by content that mixed education advice with increasingly luxury lifestyle material. Her comment sections filled with questions. How do you afford this on a student budget? Do you have a sugar daddy? Who is he? Nicole deflected with vague references to consulting work and business partnerships. Not quite lying, but not quite honest, maintaining the ambiguity that allowed her followers to project their own narratives onto her life. She didn't notice that Amanda Chen had started following her account in September 2022, using a burner account with a generic username, watching every video, piecing together the timeline of luxury that coincided with her husband's increasing absences. She didn't notice the slip-up in her October 18th video, a 5-second reflection in a mirror that showed David's distinctive Porsche taken parked behind her, its license plate partially visible, enough for someone looking closely to identify. She didn't notice until it was far too late that her documentation had become evidence, and that the woman who discovered it had resources and rage that would make Nicole's visibility fatal. Amanda Chen wasn't stupid. 14 years married to an ambitious entrepreneur had taught her to recognize the signs of infidelity: the late meetings, the enhanced grooming, the emotional distance wrapped in professional exhaustion. She'd suspected David was cheating by August 2022, confirmed it through credit card statements showing hotel charges and restaurant bills that exceeded any legitimate business entertaining, and hired a private investigator in September to document what she already knew. The investigator's report, delivered in early October, provided the basics. David was involved with a 22-year-old Filipino student named Nicole Alvarez. They'd been meeting regularly for 5 months, and they frequented a predictable rotation of hotels and restaurants. But Amanda wasn't satisfied with just knowing. She wanted to understand who this girl was, what she possessed that Amanda supposedly lacked, why David had risked their marriage and his company for someone barely out of adolescence. The internet made it horrifyingly easy. A reverse image search of Nicole's photos from the investigator's surveillance led directly to her TikTok, where 340,000 followers could watch the same content that had captured David's attention. Amanda created a burner account and began studying Nicole's digital life with the obsessive attention she'd once directed toward her own children's developmental milestones. What she found was simultaneously enraging and predictable. A beautiful young woman documenting a life of luxury that was obviously being funded by someone, filled with knowing captions that suggested awareness of the transactional nature of her existence. The content was aspirational poverty porn, a girl from nothing making it through strategic deployment of beauty and ambition, performing struggle while living increasingly well, and implicitly celebrating her ability to extract resources from someone stupid enough to provide them. The rage Amanda felt was complex and multidirectional. She was angry at David for the obvious reasons: betrayal, disrespect, the public humiliation if this became widely known. But she was equally angry at Nicole, not just for sleeping with her husband, but for documenting it, for turning Amanda's private humiliation into content for hundreds of thousands of strangers, for making money and followers from the affair that was destroying Amanda's family. And underneath both was the deepest rage of all, that David had chosen this girl, this nothing from nowhere, over everything Amanda represented and provided. Amanda watched the October 18th video 3 times before she noticed the reflection: David's car, barely visible but identifiable if you knew what you were looking for. She screen-recorded it, zoomed in, enhanced the image, and confirmed the license plate matched David's Porsche. It wasn't definitive proof to most viewers, but it was enough for anyone who knew David to potentially identify him. Nicole's recklessness with documentation had finally provided a crack in the operational security that had kept the affair relatively private. The decision about how to respond consumed Amanda for several days. Divorce was theoretically an option, but one that would cost her social standing, subject her to public scrutiny, and disrupt her children's lives. Confronting David privately might end the affair but wouldn't address her rage about being humiliated. What Amanda wanted was something more comprehensive. She wanted Nicole to understand the consequences of sleeping with other women's husbands, to experience fear and vulnerability that matched what Amanda was feeling, and to disappear from David's life in a way that made resumption impossible. On October 23rd, Amanda sent Nicole a direct message from a newly created account with a professional-sounding name. "Hi, Nicole. I represent a family that's interested in discussing a private matter with you regarding your relationship with David Chen. Please meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Raffles Place MRT. Come alone. If you don't respond or attend, I'll be contacting your scholarship office regarding your undisclosed income sources and visa compliance issues." The message was calculated to inspire terror while providing just enough ambiguity about intent. Nicole read it at 8:37 p.m., her stomach immediately dropping as the careful separation she'd maintained between her public content and David's identity collapsed. Someone knew. Someone was threatening her scholarship, the foundation of her entire existence in Singapore, the promise she'd made to her family, the future she'd sacrificed everything to secure. Nicole's immediate response was panic. She called David, who didn't answer. He was at a business dinner, phone silenced, unaware that the situation was imploding. She texted him frantically. "Someone knows about us. They're threatening my scholarship. What do I do?" The message was delivered but unread. She paced her small dormitory room, anxiety spiraling into physical symptoms: nausea, shaking hands, hyperventilation that made her dizzy. At 11:47 p.m., desperate for guidance from someone, anyone, Nicole made the decision that would both document and fail to prevent her disappearance. She posted on Reddit, seeking advice from the anonymous masses, confessing the affair and the threat and her terror in a stream of consciousness that read like a suicide note written by someone who didn't yet realize they were dying. The Reddit thread exploded with responses. Some were sympathetic. "You were manipulated by someone with power over you. This isn't your fault." Others were harsh. "You knew he was married. You took his money. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." Many were practical. "Don't go alone. Record everything. Tell someone where you'll be." And some were ominous. "Amanda Chen's family doesn't mess around. Singapore is small and surveilled, but people still disappear. Be very careful." Nicole read every comment, her decision calcifying even as the warnings accumulated. She would go to the meeting because refusing would cost her scholarship anyway. She would go alone because bringing someone felt like escalation that might make things worse. She would trust that Singapore's reputation for safety and order would protect her from anything truly terrible happening in public space. These calculations were logical given her limited understanding of what was actually at stake, and they were completely wrong. At 2:34 a.m., she posted her final update, the one that included her full name, her university, and the plea that someone contact the Philippine embassy if she didn't update by noon. Then she lay down in her dormitory bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to sleep through the remaining hours before the meeting that would be the last time anyone who cared about her would know where she was. The morning of October 24th, 2022 began unremarkably for most of Singapore. Commuters flooding MRT stations, office workers buying coffee, the orderly chaos of a city-state functioning with mechanical precision. Nicole woke at 7:00 a.m. after 3 hours of fitful sleep, showered, and dressed carefully in what she hoped projected respectability: jeans, a modest blouse, minimal makeup. She looked like a scholarship student rather than the glamorous version of herself from TikTok, hoping that appearing young and unthreatening might soften whatever confrontation was coming. She left her dormitory at 9:15 a.m., taking the campus shuttle to Kent Ridge MRT station, then the Circle Line toward Raffles Place. The commute took 40 minutes, giving her time to rehearse explanations and apologies, to imagine scenarios ranging from uncomfortable conversation to something worse that her mind couldn't quite formulate. She clutched her phone, checking repeatedly for messages from David that weren't appearing, the silence from him somehow more frightening than the pending meeting with whoever had sent the threat. She arrived at Raffles Place MRT at 9:52 a.m., 8 minutes early, emerging into the financial district's canyon of towers where Singapore's wealth was managed and multiplied. The station was crowded with workers, tourists, the usual flow of humanity that made Singapore feel simultaneously crowded and impersonal. Nicole stood near the exit, scanning faces, trying to identify who might be waiting for her. At exactly 10:00 a.m., a well-dressed woman approached, mid-30s, expensive suit, carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. "Nicole Alvarez?" she asked, her voice professional but cold. "Yes," Nicole replied, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "I'm Amanda Chen's representative. Mrs. Chen is waiting in a car nearby to speak with you privately. Please come with me." Nicole hesitated. The Reddit advice echoed in her head. Don't go to a second location, stay in public, bring a friend. But the woman wasn't grabbing her or threatening her, just standing calmly, waiting, as pedestrians flowed around them like water around rocks. And Nicole's scholarship, her family's future, her entire existence in Singapore depended on resolving this situation. "Okay," Nicole said. They walked 2 blocks to a side street where a black Mercedes S-Class waited, windows tinted, engine running. The representative opened the rear door, and Nicole saw Amanda Chen for the first time, older than the wedding photos Nicole had found online while researching David, but still beautiful in that maintained way of wealthy women who could afford to slow aging. Her expression was unreadable. "Get in," Amanda said. "We need to talk." Nicole got in. The car pulled into traffic immediately, the representative taking the front passenger seat, while a driver Nicole hadn't noticed before navigated through the financial district. Amanda said nothing for several minutes, studying Nicole with the assessment of someone evaluating a purchase. Nicole's hands shook in her lap. "Do you know who I am?" Amanda finally asked. "David's wife," Nicole whispered. "David's wife," Amanda repeated. "The mother of his children, his business partner since my family's logistics connections are what made his company successful. The woman he pledged his life to 14 years ago. That's who I am. Who are you?" "I'm sorry," Nicole said, the words automatic and inadequate. "I never meant to." "You're sorry," Amanda interrupted, her voice sharp. "You documented every expensive dinner, every hotel stay, every gift on social media for hundreds of thousands of people to see. You turned my humiliation into content, but you're sorry." "I didn't show him," Nicole protested weakly. "I never showed his face." "You showed his car. October 18th video. 5 seconds of reflection. I recognized it immediately. How long before your 340,000 followers figure it out? How long before my children see their father with a girl barely older than some of their classmates' siblings?" The car had left the financial district, now heading toward the East Coast. Nicole's geography wasn't good enough to know exactly where, but they were moving away from dense urban areas toward less populated waterfront zones. Her anxiety transformed into genuine fear. "Where are we going?" she asked, hearing the tremor in her own voice. "Somewhere private," Amanda replied, "where we can discuss how you're going to fix the situation you've created. You're going to delete all your social media. You're going to return every gift David gave you. You're going to disappear from Singapore quietly, withdrawing from university and returning to the Philippines. And you're going to sign documents confirming you'll never contact David again or speak publicly about your relationship." "I can't leave," Nicole said desperately. "My scholarship my family depends on." "Your scholarship will be revoked anyway once the university learns about your undisclosed income," Amanda said coldly. "Scholarship terms require disclosure of all financial sources. The $1,500 monthly David paid you, the gifts, the hotel stays, all violations of your visa conditions. You can leave voluntarily and quietly, or I can ensure you're deported with a record that prevents you from ever returning to Singapore or applying for visas to most developed countries. Choose." They'd reached Marina East, an area of reclaimed land with warehouses and maritime facilities, relatively deserted compared to Singapore's usual density. The car pulled into a warehouse complex, driving past closed loading bays to a building that looked unused, its windows dark, no visible security cameras. Every instinct Nicole possessed was screaming danger, but the car doors were locked, the windows wouldn't open, and the two people in front were larger and stronger than her. The car stopped. Amanda's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her expression shifting from cold control to fury. She showed the screen to Nicole. It was David, finally responding to Nicole's frantic messages from the night before, his text reading, "Whatever Amanda says, don't believe her. I'll protect you. I love you." "He loves you," Amanda said, her voice shaking with rage now rather than cold control. "He loves you enough to ruin his family, his company, his reputation. For a girl who documents everything on social media. For someone who'd sell our private life for followers and brand partnerships." She opened her car door and stepped out. The representative opened Nicole's door, gesturing for her to exit. Nicole, terrified but still trapped by the irrational belief that surely nothing truly terrible could happen in ordered, lawful Singapore, got out of the car. What happened in that warehouse over the next hour would never be fully reconstructed. Nicole's phone, which she'd been clutching, was taken immediately. Security footage in the area had been disabled through means suggesting professional assistance. The warehouse was soundproofed, isolated, and chosen specifically for the privacy it offered from Singapore's otherwise omnipresent surveillance. What is known from forensic evidence discovered later is that Nicole died in that warehouse. Whether from violence or from coerced suicide would remain disputed. That her body was transported from the location in the trunk of the Mercedes to a disposal site that was never identified. That Amanda Chen left the warehouse and returned to her normal schedule, attending a charity luncheon at 1:00 p.m. and picking her children up from school at 3:30 p.m. as though nothing had occurred. And that Nicole Alvarez, who'd posted desperately on Reddit asking for help just hours earlier, vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Nicole's disappearance triggered immediate alarm bells because of her Reddit post. By 1:00 p.m. on October 24th, when her promised noon update hadn't appeared, Reddit users began contacting Philippine Embassy in Singapore, forwarding screenshots of her posts and expressing concern that something had happened to her. Embassy officials, already accustomed to cases of Filipino nationals in distress, initially treated it as potential overreaction but began making inquiries. By 5:00 p.m., when Nicole hadn't returned to her dormitory and wasn't responding to messages from friends and family, NUS administration was notified. Campus security checked her room, finding her belongings undisturbed but her laptop open to the Reddit thread that was now generating international attention. By evening, Singapore police were involved, treating it as a missing person case with suspicious circumstances. The investigation moved quickly because of the public attention and diplomatic pressure. Nicole's Reddit post provided a detailed roadmap of where she'd been going and why, The affair with David Chen, the threat from Amanda's representative, the 10:00 a.m. meeting at Raffles Place MRT. Police reviewed security footage from the station, identifying Nicole's arrival and her departure with an unidentified woman, then tracking them to the black Mercedes that belonged to a company owned by Amanda Chen's family. David Chen was interviewed within 24 hours, his shock at Nicole's disappearance appearing genuine but not exonerating. He confirmed the affair, claimed he'd had no idea Amanda knew until Nicole's frantic messages, and expressed desperation to find her. But his cooperation came with lawyer-mediated limits that prevented truly aggressive questioning about whether he'd been involved in or aware of any plan to harm Nicole. Amanda Chen, interviewed at her lawyer's office rather than police station, a privilege wealth afforded, calmly denied any involvement in Nicole's disappearance. Yes, she'd known about the affair. Yes, she'd wanted to confront the girl. But she'd never sent any messages to Nicole, had never arranged any meeting, and had been at a business breakfast from 8:30-11:00 a.m. on October 24th, with multiple witnesses confirming her presence. The black Mercedes. Used by multiple family members and employees, its movements that morning undertaken by an employee running legitimate business errands. The employee in question, the representative who'd approached Nicole, couldn't be identified. The woman matched general descriptions but no specific employee of the family businesses. Security footage from Raffles Place showed her face partially, but facial recognition searches produced no matches in Singapore's databases. She'd vanished as completely as Nicole, suggesting professional assistance beyond what a spurned wife would typically access. The investigation uncovered the warehouse in Marina East through GPS tracking of the Mercedes, which had pinged cell towers in that area during the time Nicole was missing. But the warehouse had been cleaned professionally. No forensic evidence of violence, no biological traces, no indication Nicole had even been there beyond circumstantial timing. The owner of record was a shell company with ownership chains leading nowhere productive. David's financial records showed the $1,500 monthly payments to Nicole, the hotel bookings, the gift purchases, all confirming the affair but providing no evidence about her disappearance. His phone records showed his texts to Nicole on October 24th expressing love and promises to protect her, but no communications with Amanda that suggested coordinated action. He appeared genuinely devastated by Nicole's disappearance, but devastation wasn't innocence. The most damning evidence was circumstantial. Amanda had motive, opportunity through family resources, and the kind of wealth that could hire people who made problems disappear. But without a body, without witnesses, without physical evidence of violence, Singapore's prosecution service determined they couldn't bring charges that would survive scrutiny. The case remained open but effectively stalled, Nicole's fate obvious to everyone but provable to no one. The international attention kept pressure on the investigation for several months. Filipino advocacy groups demanded justice, noting that Nicole was the latest in a pattern of Filipino workers and students who'd vanished in Singapore under suspicious circumstances. Reddit communities obsessed over the case, crowdsourcing investigation through social media forensics and public pressure. TikTok users created memorial videos, conspiracy theories, and awareness campaigns. But by mid-2023, 6 months after Nicole's disappearance, the case had faded from daily headlines even as it remained unsolved. Amanda and David Chen divorced in March 2023, their settlement sealed but reportedly favoring Amanda significantly given David's infidelity. David stepped back from active management of Velocity Tech, though he retained ownership. Amanda continued managing her family businesses, her reputation damaged but not destroyed, protected by wealth and the legal system's inability to prove what everyone suspected. For Nicole's family in Talisay, the nightmare was ongoing and unbearable. The financial support she'd been providing ended with her disappearance, plunging them back into the poverty she'd been fighting to lift them from. Her mother, Elena, collapsed from stress and grief, her health deteriorating as she imagined scenarios of what had happened to her daughter. Her father, Benjamin, became obsessed with the case, spending hours on Reddit and Facebook groups devoted to finding Nicole, convinced that someone knew what happened and could be persuaded to tell the truth. Her younger siblings struggled to process losing the sister who'd represented their hope for a better future. The twins, Miguel and Rafael, dropped out of school to work full-time, the financial pressure making education impossible. Baby sister Sophia, 9 years old when Nicole vanished, cried herself to sleep asking when 8 Nicole was coming home, unable to understand that she probably never would. The scholarship office at NUS removed Nicole's name from active student rosters in June 2023, officially classifying her as withdrawn. Her dormitory room was cleared, her belongings shipped to her family in the Philippines, a single box containing clothes, textbooks, toiletries, and a laptop that police had examined and returned. The tangible remnants of a life that had promised so much and delivered only tragedy. The TikTok account at Nicole Luck's Life remained active, preserved by platform algorithms that didn't recognize death as sufficient reason for deletion. The 340,000 followers she'd accumulated could still scroll through her content. The aspirational lifestyle, the luxury experiences, the documentation of a life that looked glamorous until you understood it was being purchased with her safety and ultimately her life. The comment sections filled with memorial messages, with anger at David and Amanda, with warnings to other young women about the dangers of affairs with powerful men. Her final video, posted October 22nd, 2 days before she vanished, showed her having afternoon tea at Raffles Hotel, delicate sandwiches, proper china, the kind of colonial luxury that Singapore commodified for tourists. She was smiling, radiant, looking happier than she'd appeared in recent videos. "Living my best life," read the caption. "Grateful for every opportunity." The video had 2.3 million views, 450,000 likes, and 67,000 comments that ranged from admiration to suspicion to grief. The top comment, posted after her disappearance and liked into prominence, read, "She's smiling, but if you look closely, you can see the fear in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. Rest in peace, Nicole. You deserved so much better than this." Nicole Marie Alvarez came to Singapore selling a dream to herself and her followers. The fantasy that education and ambition could overcome poverty, that beauty and intelligence could unlock doors that birth had sealed shut, that performing success long enough would transform it into reality. She wasn't wrong about the power of those tools. She was wrong about their cost. She built a following by documenting her rise from Talisay poverty to NUS scholarship student, from struggling to thriving, from invisible to visible. She leveraged that visibility into opportunities that supplemented her inadequate stipend and allowed her to provide for family she loved desperately. She made choices that millions of people make, accepting help from someone powerful, entering a relationship that was more transaction than romance, prioritizing survival over morality. And she made the fatal error of documenting too much, of believing that her story belonged to her and her 340,000 followers, rather than recognizing that it involved people who valued privacy more than she valued transparency. Her final Reddit post was both a cry for help and an admission that she'd finally understood the danger she was in. "I think I'm in danger," she'd written, and she was absolutely correct. But by the time she understood it, the mechanisms of her destruction were already in motion. The tragedy isn't just her death. The tragedy is how predictable it was. Young women having affairs with married powerful men is a story as old as power itself. Those women disappearing when they become inconvenient is equally ancient. What makes Nicole's case particularly haunting is how thoroughly it was documented. Her life on TikTok, her terror on Reddit, the warnings from strangers who recognized the danger she couldn't fully perceive. The internet both chronicled and failed to prevent her death, offering advice and attention, but not the intervention that might have saved her. 3 years after her vanishing, Nicole remains missing, her case unsolved but not mysterious. Everyone knows what happened. Amanda Chen, utilizing family resources and connections, arranged for Nicole to be killed and her body disposed of in a manner that left no evidence. The method, whether violence in that Marina East warehouse or coerced suicide framed as accident, is unknown. The disposal site, whether buried in reclaimed land, weighted and dropped into the ocean, or destroyed through means that leave no trace, has never been found. David Chen lives with the knowledge that his affair killed a 23-year-old woman and destroyed his family. Amanda Chen lives with the knowledge that she murdered someone to protect her pride and social standing. Both are functionally immune from prosecution, protected by wealth and the absence of physical evidence. Both have demonstrated that in Singapore, as everywhere, justice has a price, and those who can afford it often don't have to pay it. For the 340,000 people who followed Nicole, her account stands as a memorial and a warning. The life she documented was real but temporary, purchased with her safety and ultimately paid for with her life. The lesson her followers learned, if they learned it, is not don't have affairs or don't document your life, but rather understand the power dynamics you're navigating and recognize that visibility can be fatal when it exposes secrets that powerful people need to keep. May Nicole rest in peace, wherever her remains were hidden. May her family find healing despite never receiving closure or justice. May her story remind us that the Internet's documentation of our lives is both a record of who we were and sometimes evidence of why we disappeared. And may we build a world where young women like Nicole Alvarez never again have to trade dignity for survival, where affairs don't carry death sentences, and where wealth can't purchase immunity from accountability. Her last words on Reddit: "If I don't update by noon tomorrow, please someone contact the Philippine embassy," stand as epitaph and indictment. She knew she might not survive. She documented that knowledge. Thousands read it. And still she died, alone and afraid, killed by people who valued reputation more than her life, in a city celebrated for safety and order that couldn't protect her from power deployed against her. The 47 seconds of video, the Reddit post, the TikTok account, these are what remain of Nicole Marie Alvarez. Not justice, not accountability, not even the basic dignity of knowing where her body lies. Just digital traces of a life interrupted, and the uncomfortable knowledge that sometimes documentation isn't protection, visibility isn't safety, and crying for help isn't enough when the people who hear you lack the power to intervene.